It was just another ordinary morning at Westfield High, a well-reputed school in Austin, Texas. The students bustled in the hallways, some huddled in groups chatting, others finishing last-minute assignments. But for Jacob Miller, the day started with an uneasy feeling. Jacob was different from the other students. While most of them came from families of doctors, lawyers, and business owners, he was the grandson of a farmer. His hands bore the roughness of morning chores before school. His boots still carried the faint scent of soil. He was a boy of few words, but his silence often invited mockery. As Jacob entered the classroom, he noticed the scornful glance of Miss Whitmore, his history teacher. She was a woman of high expectations, rigid discipline, and an air of superiority that made even the most confident students shrink under her gaze. The lesson began, but Jacob found himself struggling to keep up. His exhaustion from waking up at dawn to tend to the farm animals clouded his concentration. When Miss Whitmore called on him to answer a question about the Civil War, he hesitated, trying to gather his thoughts. "Mr. Miller," she snapped, crossing her arms, "if you paid more attention in class instead of whatever you do out there in the fields, maybe you wouldn't embarrass yourself." The class snickered. Jacob felt a lump in his throat, but said nothing. "Honestly, I don't see the point in wasting time on students who are clearly not cut out for academics. Maybe you should stick to what you know best: feeding pigs and plowing dirt." A hush fell over the room. Even those who had laughed earlier shifted uncomfortably. Jacob stood up, his knuckles white from gripping the desk. "I may not be as book smart as the rest, but that doesn't mean I don't deserve respect," he said, his voice steady despite the storm raging inside him. Miss Whitmore smirked. "Then prove it otherwise. Leave my classroom." The words cut deep, but Jacob didn't argue. Instead, he gathered his things and walked out, his heart pounding. He had never felt so humiliated. The next day, as the morning sun cast golden hues over the school, an unusual commotion stirred the students. The rhythmic thud of helicopter blades echoed across the sky. Teachers and students rushed outside, their eyes widening in disbelief as a sleek black helicopter descended onto the school's football field. Out stepped a tall, commanding figure in a tailored suit: James Miller, Jacob's grandfather, a man whose name was known across Texas not just for his sprawling farmland but for his vast agribus empire. He had revolutionized sustainable farming, supplying organic produce to top restaurants and major grocery chains across the country. Jacob followed behind him, his posture straighter, his face unreadable. As they entered the school, a stunned silence settled over the crowd. Even Miss Whitmore, who had never been easily rattled, looked visibly unsettled. "I understand there was an issue with my grandson in your class yesterday, Mr. Miller," said his deep voice carrying through the corridor. Miss Whitmore blinked rapidly. "Ly, Mr. Miller, I assure you I treat all my students equally." "Is that so?" he interrupted, pulling out a check from his coat pocket. "Because this school received significant funding from the Miller Foundation. I built the very science lab you take pride in, and I sponsor the history program you oversee. Yet you saw fit to humiliate my grandson over his background." The color drained from Miss Whitmore's face. "I raised Jacob to understand that hard work is honorable," he continued, his eyes never leaving hers. "Maybe you should educate yourself on that instead of looking down on those who put food on your table." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Jacob, who had remained quiet until now, stepped forward. "I don't need special treatment," he said. "I just want to be treated with respect, the same as anyone else." Miss Whitmore nodded, stiffly unable to meet his eyes. "I understand. I apologize." Jacob, a satisfied smile tugged at Mr. Miller's lips. "Good, because respect isn't given based on what wealth or status, it's earned through integrity and hard work, and my grandson has both." The students erupted into cheers, many giving Jacob nods of admiration. From that day forward, Jacob walked through the school halls with his head held high, not because of his grandfather's influence, but because he had shown everyone that dignity was not measured by books or bank accounts, but by the way one carried themselves in the face of adversity. And as for Miss Whitmore, she never underestimated another student. Again, if you made it this far, comment respect first down below. And don't forget to subscribe for more incredible stories. Olivia always felt awful after eating, fatigue, headaches, and a strange feeling in her body. She never imagined the culprit was unstable blood sugar. By the time she found out, she was already at risk for something worse. But before it was too late, she discovered a natural solution that changed her life. If this sounds familiar, check the pinned comment now.